So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mark DiBenedetto.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm sure that you can hear me. That's very nice. I'm delighted to be here. It is about storytelling. You know, you go out for interviews, you meet people, and what you'll learn is that people like a story. So there are three parts: beginning, middle, and an end. And we'll start off with an introduction right now. Many of you have heard of a very successful Broadway show called Jersey Boys. It tells the story of four New Jersey guys who like to play music and love lyrics, and they went on to become a sensation. Well, who would expect that 40 years later it would be one of the longest running shows on Broadway? Have any of you been to see the show? Raise your hands. Yeah, it's pretty popular. There's members of my family who've seen it more than twice. But today we're going to talk really about a little bit of a variation on Jersey Boys, which is in fact a Jersey boy, because that's precisely who's standing in front of you today. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, and then I moved with my family to Middlesex County for middle school and high school. So I grew up in Edison, so it was quite a bit of a homecoming to be coming down here to do the prep work for today's presentation and driving down here to visit with all of you today. So from Middlesex County, I attended St. Joseph's High School in Metuchen, and we had what was called the college prep course. The prep part was good in terms of learning how to study and learning how to communicate and figuring out what we wanted to do with our lives. However, we're always not so certain in high school. I think programs like the one that the college is holding today can really illuminate the thought process. We're inundated with media and digital messaging and so many different options that are open to you as you're preparing to think about college and your careers after there. I think it's very important for you to consider all your resources and to understand that almost anything is possible. What started it all for me was reading. So here's a little bit of a funny note. We find that our families and our friends know us the best. So this is a slide that says, Mom knows best. My mom and both my mother and father were avid readers. I know that might sound a little archaic, but you have so many opportunities to get information available to you, whether it's on an MP3 or an iPad or an iPod of any sort. I tend to still visit the library, if you can imagine. I find a certain amount of solace and calm in actually sitting in a quiet place and reading a book, but in my briefcase today is my Kindle, and so I'm trying to keep up on things when I can as well. My mother volunteered at the library in Edison, actually, because she liked to read so much that she wanted to have access to the books as they were first published. And so she would be one of the people that could pre-read, make sure the book was in good order, and then it would be released into circulation. So along the way, my mom would find books that she thought each of my brothers and sisters might be interested in. So what did she select for me? Well, she thought that, well, I'll tell you in a moment what she selected for me. Let's look at some other options that might be right for you in terms of inspiration. I think many of you know the story of Steve Jobs. He's an incredible American success story. He's iconic. And the published biography of his has been on the bestseller list for a while. It's a great read. It's a big, thick tome. But if you're interested in communication, technology, or very modern marketing, if you think about it, then perhaps that's a book that you might want to read on your Kindle or your iPhone or wherever you want to read it these days. Next, I put up a book called Hug Your Customers. This is by a gentleman named Jack Mitchell, who started a company in Connecticut. It's all about great luxury service. But what Mr. Mitchell talks about is being intimate and knowing your customers and making sure that they have a good experience when they come to visit your store. So, I know a lot of people that have suggested that book to people. This is a gentleman who you all know of. He was the first or the youngest billionaire in America. His name is Mark Zuckerberg, or Zuck as the title of the book is called. Think like Zuck. So if you're interested in marketing in the technological world, or thinking about how digitally we'll be communicating messages and brand messages to people in the future, some type of excitement might come to you from that type of book. Maybe some of you are interested in music. This is actually a little bit of a precursor There's a new musical that's going to be opening on Broadway called Motown, and it's the story of Barry Gordy and the people that brought together a great musical revolution in the late 50s and 60s that we all know somewhat historically called Motown. So Barry Gordy, To Be Loved. And then last, a lot of you may know Mark Cuban. He's a sports emperor now. And of course, he got his start by building a great computer company. His book is called How to Win. So I want you to think for just a moment. A book that you've recently read, or a book that you'd like to read, that's opened your mind to what the opportunities for you are in your life. This is about my story, but really what I want you to do is be inspired about thinking about the chapter of your story that you're on right now. There are many chapters to come. So where did mine get started? Well, my mother knew that I was always sort of impressed by very expensive cars. We had one uncle who had a Cadillac, and this was the era when it had the big fins on the back. We had, I can remember always sort of wanting to go to the department stores in downtown Newark and visit the expensive furniture departments or the clothing departments. So there's an old-fashioned expression, and it's called having champagne taste with a beer wallet. So my family always used to joke about that with me before I really even knew what champagne and beer were. Well, I always sort of knew what beer was. But I didn't understand that they were explaining that my tastes were above maybe where my STEM level was. So along came a new book at the library, and my mother selected it for me to read. And I want to select it for all of you to read. It's an interesting biography of a man, a company, and even a city called Dallas, Texas. The name of the book, Minding the Store. The author, Stanley Marcus. Mr. Marcus wrote about the company that his father, his aunt, and his uncle founded in 1907 in Dallas, Texas. And the premise in those days was that everyone who wanted to wear clothing basically had their clothing made. You didn't go into a store and get a ready-made pair of clothing, piece of clothing. So Mr. Marcus founded in 1907 Neiman Marcus, and they offered their customers great merchandise, ready-made clothing, which was revolutionary in those days, but also the key element that he marketed for over 100 years was great service. It's so often spoken about and so seldom delivered, but it's the hallmark of what makes Neiman Marcus very special. Great service, really caring about the people that come to visit your establishment, whether it's an office or a car wash or a bank or a fine department store. We have to be authentically interested in the experience that the other person is having. Now, where does this come up in marketing? When people are pleased about an environment or retail experience, they tell approximately 15 people about that experience. When they're unhappy, they tell 23 people about it. So you want to market to the good side of that curve. You want your business to grow, you want the people that are involved in your business to participate and make sure that everyone understands the values of the companies. Have any of you visited a Neiman Marcus store? We have just a couple here in New Jersey. We have, there are 40 of them across the country. But I read this book and I was fascinated by it. Mr. Stanley Marcus was the gentleman who introduced the Christmas book. So one year they were trying to put together a catalog to send to their customers. And they were thinking about something that would catch the attention of everybody. And they came up with the idea of his and her airplanes. So normally you're flipping through a catalog and you're looking at ties and shirts and sweaters, but Neiman Marcus took it to the next level and introduced his and her airplanes. The book fascinated me. I thought it was a great story. I loved all of the luxury that was involved in it, but also something about the magic and the dream of making people's experiences and lives richer. I read this book when I was a sophomore in high school, so it's never too early to see where the seed of what your story will be about might begin. So, also in high school, and some of you may be thinking about this, it's almost time for spring break, right? So, being a high school student here in New Jersey, we got the gumption to actually ask one of our parents if we could borrow a car, and 3 of my buddies and I drove down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we wanted to be like in the movies and go to spring break and have a great time. Maybe a little advance of where we should have been doing it in college, but we were a little adventuresome at that point. So we drove down to Florida, and we were having a great time. And, you know, as luck will have it, we had a couple of very severely rainy days. I had remembered seeing a note in a newspaper that Neiman Marcus had opened its first store outside of Texas in Florida. So after having 4 stores in Texas, they opened a store in Bal Harbour, Florida. And somehow, with the luck of the rainy gods, I got 3 high school guys to drive with me down to Bal Harbour, Florida. We had to go all the way down to south of Miami, and we discovered the Neiman Marcus store in Bal Harbour, Florida. Well, you have to understand, I'm about 16 and a half years old. I'd never been to a shopping center that had palm trees before. I thought it was the most amazing, lush environment that I'd ever expected. Even the other guys who weren't that keen on going to a store, they were truly impressed. The most impressive thing of that visit was what happened when we went inside the Neiman Marcus store. We were dressed incredibly casual for those days, and we went into what would be considered, you know, an elite or a luxury store. And everyone said hello to us. Everyone was very kind to us. We were asked if we needed directions. We found our way to the gift department on the lark of buying a gift for our mothers, which we really didn't think we could ever afford in such a store. But a nice saleswoman brought us over. She showed us these small little flower pots. It just all lined up. There were 4 guys. There were 4 flower pots in the set. It cost $15, which seemed like a little bit of a stretch, but if you break it down, each of us were spending a big $3.75 for our mother's gift, which they were nice enough to let us go to Florida. So what I wanted to impress upon you is I read about this place in a book, and then a year and a half later I find myself in their store, and all of the talk that Mr. Marcus had put into the book was happening in real life. It was a virtual reality, a luxury store with glass elevators, beautifully well-spoken and well-attired sales associates treating me and my vagabond friends as if we, you know, had been there all the time, and they made us feel very welcome. So, again, very impressionable. I thought that was really terrific, and I understood why Mr. Marcus had written the points that he had in his book, and here they were manifested to a group of high school students. Well, after spring break, eventually, you go to college. So I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go to school. I visited 6 or 7 of them. I was at St. Joe's, as I mentioned, and we studied some business courses and business prep. That led my decision to go to school in the nation's capital. So I attended the American University in Washington, D.C. When I got there, I was an undeclared major. Not a very unusual phenomenon. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? What I noticed by the end of the first year was that the business students and the marketing students specifically were the most focused, and they had their chart planned out. They knew what they wanted to do. So I quickly went over to the business school office. I enrolled in their program and declared myself as a marketing major. So little did I know that, that afternoon when I felt like I had to make a decision, that I found the right thing, and I found something that would serve me and through all the chapters of my career to date. So marketing is a wonderful, all-inclusive profession or region to be in. What I appreciated was that it incorporated so many other things. You have to think about psychology, you have to think about demographics, economics, sometimes political situations can weigh into the way that you either present yourself or your company. So marketing takes into account a lot of situations, and what I've seen in the last 25 years is that marketing evolves at a very fast pace, and more so now than ever before. While I was studying marketing at American University, I had a very interesting marketing professor. His name was Philip Grace, and he was a Texan. He was an eccentric Texan, which I've learned to love over the years. But Dr. Grace recommended and talked about things that would happen in the future. He projected the idea that we would go into stores and that we would see holographic fitting rooms. So if you think about Warby Parker's eyeglass site right now, are any of you familiar with Warby Parker? They make great glasses. Okay, 2 years from now you'll be looking at glasses. But Warby Parker has this computer program where you can select the glasses and you can see what they look like on you. And there are many sites across the internet where a woman or a man can imagine what they're going to look like in the clothing. And this is something that Dr. Grace was talking about in the late 90s. He also talked about electronic payment. He talked about digitalized data. He talked about things that we thought were purely science fiction in those days. But he also had a certain understanding of the past. And having grown up in Texas, he and his family had spent their years shopping at Neiman Marcus stores. So we have the original Texan talking about Neiman Marcus, and on his required reading list, guess what comes up next, was minding the store. He considered Stanley Marcus to be the guru of modern marketing, because it goes beyond an advertisement in a newspaper or a blog, as we would call it today, but it was an entire encapsulation of what a shopping experience should be. Product that we bring in from around the world, beautiful, lush environments where people can come and spend their time enjoying, purchasing and selecting and visiting, and then also, of course, the importance of the people in that environment. It comes down to those three things. But this was on our required reading list. We talked about it in class. I had benefited from having read it 3 years earlier, but it was very interesting to see it come back in my college curriculum. So you're getting a little bit of a theme here, Neiman Marcus, the book in high school, the visit to the Bal Harbor store, now it comes up in college. Wait to hear what happened next. 3 miles from my college, Neiman Marcus opened up a store in Washington, D.C. So I went and rather serendipitously got a job there. Now I want to talk to you about serendipity and impulse and going with what's in front of you. Short story, but I think it's really the reason I'm standing in front of you today. I went to play tennis with a friend of mine from American University. And for the first time in probably 10 or 15 matches, I defeated this individual in the game. And I still relish that victory. He was a high school tennis player. I just sort of played with my cousins on the weekends. And he always beat me. And if you know anything about sports or tennis or golf, you should always play with people that are better than you. Going to improve your game. But the heart of the matter was something was wrong with this gentleman, young man. And I said, what's going on? I've never beaten you before. He explained to me that he'd gone for an interview the day before at Neiman Marcus. And I said, David, first of all, what are you doing getting a job? He was from a very affluent family. His father was called a flying doctor. You have to remember, this is 1978, and his father was a famous eye doctor who had his own plane, and he would go and perform surgeries around the South. So David, wait a second, why are you getting a job, whatever? Okay, so what went wrong with the interview? He said, I didn't connect up with the woman, I don't know what it was, but he was really disturbed about it. Flash forward, where do you think I am the next morning? Blazer, suit, shirt and tie. I'm at the personnel office of Neiman Marcus applying for a job. I hadn't even thought about it until he said that. I got the job, and I started in their sales department, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. All of a sudden, I read this book, I visited the store, I'm studying it in marketing, and now I'm a sales associate at Neiman Marcus, Washington, D.C. It was really the beginning of a great story and pretty much of a dream come true. So this slide says working in college, because that's where I got my start. I actually was a paper boy when I was in 7th grade. I was a bus boy at a seafood restaurant on Route 1 in Edison when I was in 10th grade. I did other jobs around the neighborhood, but my first serious paycheck on a regular basis came in college. My message is, it's never too early to do some investigation about where you want to be. And try different things out. Get a part-time job. Go in on Saturdays and help somebody out in their office to see what the experience might be like. It's just the way to establish yourself and to find out what you want to be doing and how you can build on that in the future. Well, I loved working at Neiman Marcus. They put you through a 3-day training process, which they teach you about the company, which I felt like I was somewhat of an expert on, being all sort of knowing at 20 years old, and read the book twice. But it was very interesting. There was a 3-day training process about the history of the company, about how to conduct sales, about how to clientele people, and also understanding what the importance of the marketing of the company had been at that point for almost 70 years. What did Neiman Marcus stand for as a brand? And so what did Mark DiBenedetto stand for as a brand within Neiman Marcus? Well, I stood for embodying everything they stood for, because believe me, they had it figured out. They knew the right way about going about business. For many years after that first job, I quoted and continue to quote from Mr. Stanley's book about things as simple as, put this in its context if you're standing in a big department store. We're not selling dresses, we're selling satisfaction. And for every customer that comes to visit our store, there's the right piece of merchandise. And for every piece of merchandise, there's the right customer. So these are some basic business ideas that I learned early on in Neiman Marcus and have used to my success. But it's the marketing of the idea of what a company stands for that's very important, and our ability to communicate that and to transmit that to the public, and often within our own organization as well, which I believe is critical to the success of most organizations and individuals. So, a little bit of a public service announcement. Dedication and hard work figured in very early. I was in training on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and my first day of the job was on a Saturday morning. And I got there about an hour early, and I helped do the stock work. We unpacked a new collection by a new designer named Calvin Klein. It was his first men's collection that arrived, and we merchandised it on the floor, then we put the extra stuff in the stock room, and then, my goodness, it's 10 o'clock, like, ready for the business to happen. My career is about to start. I looked up, and I saw this very attractive couple coming across the floor, and I looked, and I realized, I felt like somebody receiving a kickoff. None of my blockers were in place. That ball was coming right at me. And what had happened was, the gentleman on the left, I know these people like this yesterday, Henry, had gone upstairs to alterations to check on some of his customers' things. Susie had gone to the cafeteria to get another cup of coffee. And Margaret was in the office working on that stock. So the ball was coming right at me. And they walked right over to me and said, "Good morning," and I welcomed them to Neiman Marcus. And what do you think the first question the gentleman had was? "Where's the men's room?" Okay, that one I knew. So I asked the woman to wait a moment. I walked the gentleman to an opening, and I pointed in the right direction, and I went back. And the woman said, "Oh, we don't shop very often, but now's the time to do it." I said, "Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. You're my first customer." And she started laughing so hard. She said, "You don't understand. He only shops twice a year. We've got a lot of shopping we have to get done here." I was thinking, wow, this is going to be a good challenge and sort of an interesting first take. Long and the short of it is, 2.5 hours later, the gentleman had selected, 4 sports jackets, 1 suit, 7 or 8 shirts, 8 or 9 ties, the trousers, the V-neck sweaters. He selected, with my assistance and his taste arbiter, who was his girlfriend, soon to become fiance, soon to become wife. I have kept up with them all these years later. And it was just one of those things. So I always say to people, hard work and dedication, be at the starting gate when the game starts. And if you have to be there a few minutes early, do that as well. Another thing that happened in that first customer situation was we didn't have his size on the floor. I thought, wow, about 45 minutes ago, we unloaded the stock into the stock room. I understood how that was. So I was running into the stock room, grabbing the correct size, and bringing it out for a try. That impressed my manager and the assistant manager more than almost anything else I had done that opening day. The fact that I realized that our ability to satisfy a customer was not limited to what we saw in front of us, but that we should use the resources as simple as the stock in the stock room to make sure that we maximize the interaction and the opportunity for the customer. So dedication and hard work, they're so strong in establishing who you are in the work environment and the people that you'll be working with. Respect and integrity. I can tell that this is an incredibly respectful group already. I just want to say, there's a vibe that goes out when people respect one another as individuals. And I think that it's a hallmark of your personal integrity and your personal brand. Respect is very simple to accomplish. It values one another as human beings. It's a hello, it's a greeting, it's a collaborative effort to let people know that you are respectful of their part in the process, whether it's a customer or somebody on your team. And it's a hallmark and an element of your personal integrity. Communication and good listening skills. Good listening skills, more than the communication. Good listening skills. I have a sign on my desk that has two sides to it. One says listen, the other side says communicate. I almost always have the listen side showing to me, because I want to listen. When given the choice, like this morning, I can talk. And I can talk, and I can talk. But I've learned to talk about things that mean to people by listening to what they're saying. Listen to opportunities in the workplace, listen to tips and suggestions about things people may think might be interesting to you, and also keep an open mind. I think that's a very important part about communication. Communication now is both verbal, it's in text, it's email. Be very careful of your own personal style when it comes to electronic communication. I've sat through corporate seminars on the importance of getting an email just right, reading email time and time and time again. Sometimes when it's extremely important, read it backwards, make sure that each word you have is correct. It sounds like maybe not the most important information or tips, but know that when you communicate with people, it stands around for a long time and it says who you are and where you see yourself going. Remember, this is a story. Think of yourself as writing the chapters of your story and where you want the next part of it to end up. Building a positive track record. When I was reviewing this, I realized that perhaps I could make the correlation to building a positive grade point average. If you know, after your freshman and sophomore year, as many of you have completed those in high school, you have a GPA. If you do well in the beginning, it's so much easier to maintain that average and to build on it. If we start off not so strong, because it's a cumulative grade point average, you have to work that much harder to improve it each semester and each course. Well, ladies and gentlemen, life is a grade point average, and life is a track record. So you want to get out ahead of this. You want to be known for working well. You want to be known for these attributes that I've already discussed, because building a solid foundation in the beginning is the best way to have a positive track record. Managing your personal brand. This is new because, when we were growing up, marketing was one thing, but personal brand is a new idea, but you're all very comfortable with it. Stand for things. Have values, whether it's respect and integrity, or humanity or humility. Know that you individually are your own personal brand, and you have to be both your marketing director and ultimately the CEO of your brand. So you think about great brands in the world, whether it's a great motor car company, or it's a great technology company, or a music label. Those are brands that are carefully managed by teams of marketing executives and tremendous amount of interaction with the customers and think tanks and brainstorming. You are your own marketing team and your own CEO. Take that message to heart and think about that as you move forward. Relationship building comes all the way along. From those first customers I met, to the Henry and the Susie and the Margaret that weren't on the floor at the time, I built a relationship with all of the people that I've interacted with throughout my career, and it's very important in terms of a group success. An individual is only as successful as a group, and relationship building is a part of that. And all of these thoughts are interwoven. Respect, integrity, relationship building, they're all the things that are going to make you successful in establishing your brand and moving the exciting chapters of your life forward. Networking. Well, Mr. Zuckerberg has certainly put that at the top of our list. Networking is something that is age-old. 5,000 years ago, people knew the guy in the next, cave dwelling that had the fire. We went over and got it, and they knew where the elephant. Networking is part of who we are as a species. It's evolved, and it's evolved at the speed of light now. And so networking is extremely important, but it means as basic as hello, my name is Mark, I'm from this company and I've come to talk about that. Where are you from? Do you have a card? It's saying hello to a neighbor on the bus and saying, how's your new job going? Is everything working out okay? It's answering the phone and finding out that somebody you play tennis with, their son's interested in pursuing something in business and marketing and asking if they can buy your office for a chat and a coffee and hear what your story was and what it might be interested in. So those are sort of the classic elements of networking. And what's happening right now is, of course, the great luxury of technology is making networking that much more of an advanced sport. Between LinkedIn and, of course, Facebook and so many other opportunities for social networking, whether it's Tumblr or tweeting, whatever it might be, we have the opportunity to use the power of the internet to build our personal brand. And networking is something that goes on. If you take this message seriously, it goes on from this day forward. Have a networking schedule in your mind. How do you want to keep in touch with people you've met? How do you want to keep in touch? On what frequency do you want to keep in touch with the people that you've worked with? I will give you all a tip that I wish I had 25 years ago. Keep an electronic diary of the people that you know and the people that you work with, and make sure that you stay in touch with them. Because networking now is more important than it was 10 years ago, and it will be proportionally more important 10 years from now, 5 years from now. So it's an often used word. We hear it connected with social networking a lot, but the reality is that that's a very important element of success in business and in marketing. Okay, so I mentioned that here we are in Act 2. Sales at Neiman Marcus, loved it, did really great. That first guy spent thousands of dollars, and this is in 1978. It was a lot. It was really one of those great success stories, and it just made me feel like, wow, I found something I really like to do. It was just fun, it was exciting. So after 11 months of that, Neiman Marcus decided that I embodied this culture so well that they promoted me to be the human resources manager of the store. They had an ulterior motive. I was responsible for the non-selling areas of the store. So here I was, I graduated from college, and I have a full-time job, which made my family extremely happy, made me happy, and then it was in a field that I wasn't really all that familiar with. I was responsible for hiring, interviewing, evaluating, sometimes terminating, people that were involved in what are called the sales support area of the store. So it's everything from the loading dock to the security guards to the people that manned our cafeteria, the visuals department, the housekeeping staff. There were about 70 people that I was somewhat responsible for as the assistant manager of personnel, it was actually called, now it's called human resources. So, but here's the ulterior motive I believe the store management had. One of my responsibilities was to conduct the 3-day training course for the new sales associates. I had been such a sponge for everything that had been taught to me and been a positive embodiment of following these rules of great customer service that they wanted me to be the person that shared that with the new sales associates. I love that part of the job the most, as you can imagine. So 11 months into it, I'm sitting down to get my review. Do all of you know what a review is? Every time we take a job, think about you're on a 60-day or 30-day trial. Officially in companies, at the end of each year, you have a performance evaluation and a review. So I was all gangbusters. This has been a great year. Look at me. I graduated from college. I got a job. Got a salary. Great. My boss didn't agree. So this is a message about backtracking, second thoughts, hurdles. We don't always just run and sprint to the finish. So in a meeting with the store manager, it was clearly put to me that my boss, the head of human resources, thought it would be a good idea for me to maybe leave Neiman Marcus. Okay, that's a thing for a second. What? Are you crazy? And the boss of the store was smart enough to realize, hey, this guy had been a pretty terrific seller 11 months ago. So he very casually said, or Mark, you could go and sell on the sales floor again. And I looked at him dead in the eye and said, oh, Mr. Harriman, I would never leave Neiman Marcus. I would gladly go back to sales, which I did. So sometimes going forward, sometimes means taking a step back or a step sideways. So what I loved about my second time in sales is that I was exposed to different areas of the store. I learned about the gift department and china and crystal and silver, which many of you will never be exposed to, but it helped me along the way in understanding the clients that I was going to be working with in the years to come. I also got exposure in the fur salon, which is a very small section of the business, but very important to know and very specialized. I would eat my lunch every day in the fur workroom. I always brown bagged, which I meant to put on my public service announcement. I have this whole theory that brown bagging leads to a successful career. Well, I can share that with you individually if you want to know it. But I would eat my lunch and I would watch a gentleman take apart a very expensive coat and then put it back together. So then the next day when I'm on the sales floor and someone's asking me about a fur and I explain to them the inner workings, they're looking at this young guy, he's probably 22, and they're like, how do you even know this stuff? I was just taking it all in. And that's what I want to share with you. Take it all in, absorb, see what's going on in your environment, and keep your eyes and your ears open. So from there, I became the assistant department manager of a very expensive dress department in the store. And from that position, I was eligible to interview for the executive training program, which takes place in Dallas, Texas. I think I put up their executive development program, which is now called. It's a 13-week training course. I moved to Texas. I went through the course, and I started to rotate through different offices. There were 22 people in that class. 20 had come from college, and 2 of us had come from Neiman Marcus stores. So what the advantage was of having been in the company was, as soon as we got to Texas, the other gentleman, his name was Michael Woods, we were both immediately placed into buying offices as assistant buyers. I would have liked to have rotated to get some taste of some of the other areas of the store, but we got our jobs pretty quickly and it did feel pretty successful. So I became an assistant buyer in one area, and I used all those other attributes that I discussed with you. Working hard, communication, respect and integrity, and I became the assistant buyer for a larger department. I was moved out to one of the stores to be the department manager, and from there I became a buyer. The buyer was a really great sort of accumulation of experience at Neiman Marcus. I was able to travel. I visited New York often. Remember, I'm based in Dallas. I visited Milan. And I went out to visit the Neiman Marcus stores across the country. So here I found myself in Beverly Hills and San Francisco and Chicago. Wherever we had strong businesses, I would go and visit. Buying is a tremendous opportunity to understand what the needs of the customers are and what the needs of the company are. Company and customer go hand in hand. So these are all the different brands that are out there in the world. I should have some others like Nike and Swatch up there, but I have found myself in this designer luxury milieu, if you will. So I take my Act 3. After being in Neiman Marcus for 8 years, from sales associate to buyer, and traveling, I met Giorgio Armani. I promised I wasn't going to drop any names, but anyway, Giorgio Armani was pretty cool. I did this whole little speech to him, how excited I was to meet him. He nodded, he smiled, I walked away. My colleagues, of course, explained to me he didn't understand English, but that's okay. I still was pretty thrilled about it. And I'll keep it along the way. So I had a great time. Now it was the opportunity to actually move to New York. I joined a company called Bergdorf Goodman. It's pretty famous. It sits right there on 5th Avenue, 57th Street, and it is considered to be the ultimate luxury store in the United States. And what that means is that all the marketing challenges are ratcheted up that much higher. You have to have your brand image in place, you have to understand about customer service, you have to have great understanding of what the team is trying to accomplish and build up continually a good, strong track record. From Neiman Marcus, I was recruited by Saks Fifth Avenue. Saks Fifth Avenue people moving from the runways in Paris and Milan, like that's the Bergdorf's buyer. He's buying for one store. That must be a really easy job. When you go to Saks Fifth Avenue, you're buying for 10 or 15 stores, so it does become exponentially harder. But it was nice to have a good record in the industry so that I was sought after by a competitor company. After Saks Fifth Avenue, I was recruited by Chanel. I'd been the Chanel buyer amongst many different brands at Bergdorf's for years and at Saks. So the people at Chanel, inadvertently, that's not the right word, but somewhat subconsciously had been interviewing me for years. And you know what, I realized I was interviewing all these companies that I did business with subconsciously as well. And I always thought Chanel was the most professional. So all of a sudden, they asked me to go and talk to a recruiter, and I started to work for Chanel. I ran the store in New York, and then we built a big, beautiful store further down 57th Street that was hosted by no less than 7 opening parties, the last of which was Karl Lagerfeld coming, he's the designer for Chanel, and he actually was the DJ at our last opening party, so that's kind of exciting to have Carl, the DJ, spinning platters for us. Now, of course, he's so famous, he's hanging out with all the rock stars. This was back in 1996. So 5 years at Chanel. Look at this, Bergdorf Goodman. When we leave a company, if we leave on good terms, it may be just an opportunity for another chapter. Bergdorf Goodman recruited me to run the women's store. They saw me running the Chanel store, and they knew me, and they said, you know what, this guy embodies what we're about. He's a communicator, he's a collaborator, he has a good track record, he's known in the industry. Let's give him a bigger arena, and let's have him run our store for us. So that was fantastic. Running 5 different floors, each of them almost like different stores with different merchandise, and just another great company focused on marketing. What are things that we're communicating out that bring customers to our door? And then from Bergdorf Goodman, I made the move to Fendi. I will say that working at Chanel and Fendi have been enjoyable in that they are what I call a vertical organization. They manufacture product, they retail it, they wholesale it, they understand all of it. I certainly enjoyed my time at Neiman's and Bergdorf's and Saks, which are multi-brand stores. But all of this is to say that what I learned in the very beginning at Neiman Marcus has helped me every step of the way. Understand what you want to do, go and find opportunities that might be right for yourself. It may come from just meeting somebody or reading about it, but what you have to do is have a game plan for yourself. Let's not call it a game plan. Call it a marketing plan for your personal brand. So what I want to share with you today, it all started out with a book and some chapters and some stories. My chapters are still being written. I feel like I'm about halfway through. I'll come back in 20 years and give the other half of this presentation. But you all are starting out. You've got some good foundations. The fact that you came here today to understand and be better equipped at career readiness really signals you're on the launching pad. So I want you to begin writing your own chapters of what your career story will be. Live those dreams and believe it. So we come back just to the key points: dedication, hard work, respect and integrity, communication, good listening skills, good clicker skills, building a positive track record, managing your personal brand, relationship building, and networking. They're words. You can put meaning to these words. Have these words be the framework for the chapter that you're writing, the first chapter, the second chapter of your career story. Have a dream, you can make it happen, and you can believe in it.
Okay, that was very good. I appreciated that. I hope both of you did as well. Anybody have any questions for Mark? Yes, we have a question in the back. Let me see if I can. Okay, go ahead.
My name's Nick. What's your current position?
Well, actually right now I am in the job hunt. I left the Fendi organization. We had a new president, and I'm really exploring new opportunities. I'm working on some consulting projects, and I think, as I was explaining to Till, in the not too distant future I'm going to be able to add, even to my estimation, a pretty impressive brand to that resume page. So I'm in what I call Job Hunt 2.0, and that's why I know the value of networking.
Okay, very good, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? I had a couple of people ask me ahead of time a question. Here's one for you, Mark. It said, did you ever think you'd be working for Fendi or Chanel?
No, not originally. Neiman Marcus was a great eye-opening experience. I was exposed to all the brands that they carried. I must say that for the first few years at Neiman Marcus, and because of the era, I thought I was going to be working at Neiman Marcus sort of for my whole life. But I liked what Mr. Delaval shared with us at the beginning, that the reality is that you all will have 14 jobs on average by the time you reach 38. So keep an open mind, try to find companies that align with what your goals are, and I didn't expect to ever work at such prestigious companies as that.
Okay, very good.
Mark, with all your knowledge and experience, have you ever considered starting your own brand, going independent?
That's an interesting question. I've been asked that along the way. Most people position it as, do you ever see yourself having your own store or having your own company? I very much appreciated the collaborative process that I entered into at Neiman Marcus, and I always felt strength from the team. So it's not a primary goal of mine is to have Mark DiBenedetto company or Mark DiBenedetto store. I'm more of a team player, and I love what comes about from that collaborative process.
Okay, thank you. Another question that was handed me, it says, what did you like better, traveling or working in one place?
I like traveling a lot for a number of years, and then I liked it a little bit less and a little bit less. So I think that one has to try out a lot of things. I've been through 3 full passports, one because the pages were all full, and then of course we traveled at a different age than we did even in the 80s and the 90s. So I think that there's an opportunity in all of our chapters in our careers to do both. The last job that I had at Fendi was probably one of the most exciting as Vice President of Wholesale, because I did have an office. I did travel to Italy, both Rome and Milan, to greet our clients. But when I was in the United States, what I really enjoyed was going out and visiting our client stores. So whether it was a Nordstrom or a Bloomingdale's or Neiman Marcus, I would go to their stores and give product knowledge seminars about the Fendi product and be engaged in their clients. So for me, I would have to say, Till, it's probably a combination of both, but travel is not as glamorous as it once was.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody have any other questions for Mark?
Mark, as far as your career as you went along, were there mentors that you had, and did you seek them out, or how did the mentoring process begin?
That's an excellent question, and I should probably add that to my list of important things to remember. I've had mentors all along the way, the people that I communicate with, but what I learned early on was that I always try to pay attention to what my boss was doing and to learn sort of the right principles. When I was growing up in business, you were very often not in big office environments where you were seated right next to whoever the person more senior to you was. So I always really paid attention to the way they handled the business and then the way they prioritized their time. So I would have to say that for the first 8 or 9 years of my career at Neiman Marcus, my boss, with the exception of that human resources manager, my bosses were my mentors, and I learned a lot from the store manager and the other people in the store. But I think that the amount of information that's available to us now in terms of education and learning and mentoring, I think it's an important part of a growth process. So there are 3 or 4 people that I stay in touch with, that I meet with every 6 months or so, that have taught me sort of the right way to conduct and to propel oneself forward in a career. But mentoring is important, and mentoring is a 2-way avenue, if you will. The people that are mentoring gain as much from seeing people develop and grow on their own. Throwing them the ball and having them run with it is one of the most exciting things. My management style has been described in reviews by employees as collaborative and yet very much not hands-on. I hire people, surround yourself with good people, and then let them do their jobs. Always be their partner. No one's out on a limb without me. I take ultimate responsibility for my team and the bottom line and the top line. However, through the course of the process, I've found the most success comes in individual development by letting people do their jobs, making some mistakes, with the understanding that you're in it as a partnership, if that makes sense.